It's a Wednesday morning and our chance to visit with John Madsen, Regional Vice President with United FCS. And they have offices throughout the area here. And John, great to see you again. We were just chatting. Spring has kind of sprung on us now. It seemed like we got, tempted a few different times really early in the year with these warm temps. And then it was back to reality for a while. And but now it seems like it's here for good. The last week or so has been really gorgeous. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Always interesting to listen to our farm friends out there. I know some of them will say right before the spring really broke, it's kind of nice to even throw a little snow back on us just to hold back our temptation to get going too early. And that was really the case this year. Things warmed up, got pretty nice there for a while. We did hit that cold spell, as you suggested, and now we seem to be in at least a weather pattern that's fairly stable. Been into the roughly the 60s during the day, and haven't been getting down into those 30s or anything at night, at least recently here. And I know there's been a lot of seed put in the ground within the last week to 10 days, so things have really changed out there quickly.
And at the speed at which these fields can be prepared and then planted too, it really makes your head spin. You think back even one generation as to how this equipment has kind of changed the way we look at the window of planting. You used to think of almost 3-4 weeks sometimes to get things planted. Now what they can do in a matter of hours or certainly a few days.
Yeah, absolutely. Agriculture sure hasn't stood still. I think it's probably one of the neatest industries and ways of life to measure even us as Americans over time, how we have industrialized and mechanized and, through all facets of life, we've always tried to figure out how can we do things faster, quicker, cheaper. And farming is certainly not immune to that, and it's figured out ways to get its work done more efficiently all the time. And not just, we maybe focus a little too much on the grain farming side of things, but I just am continually amazed at how much more efficient the livestock, enterprises continue to be. You see the robotic milking equipment that's becoming more readily available out there. You name it. There's just a lot of efficiency. When people hear how efficient the American agricultural scene is, there's no question about it. We are just ultra efficient in being able to make food and fiber for this country. And probably what frustrates me at times is maybe the taking that for granted and maybe the lack of appreciation for it. And it's somewhat frustrating to listen to talk at how they're just churning up resources and abusing things and so forth. And really, what's interesting around here is I've never heard anyone that wants to blatantly, squander and make their land in worse condition for the next generation than how they received it, or, downgrade the water, and so forth. I'm not trying to get into a big political thing here, but, really, people, they want to preserve and make their resources well. That's what makes their livelihood continue to flow and work. So, but you're right, getting back to your mechanization, things go in so quickly nowadays. And, of course, what's happened is we've figured out with good seed technology and good breeding practices over the years, the longer that that seed has a chance to flourish and be in good conditions, everything, stems off of great production. So giving it more time and the right things, hopefully it all comes back to them. And that's just the game that's played. So.
Right. It's unfortunate because we've got that part of it figured out. But what about, the pricing? That seems to be the thing. If there could be a little more stability there, I think a lot of people would be happy. It's hard not to, be paid more for what you're doing, and right. Say, no, that's okay, But, the thing is when you see these drops like we have the last couple of years now, it's quite a dramatic, just picture yourself, like you were saying, having to deal with, half your income suddenly. What would you be able to do, even without having all this investment that a lot of these farmers do have?
Yeah, absolutely. Markets, of course, that's always been a hard thing in agriculture. It's just brutal at times. It doesn't necessarily care if it's returning a profit to them, and so it makes their job extremely difficult to find out those points that yes, I can make some money and hopefully lock in that price and hold something. But just so difficult. There is no easy way to fix these markets. Yesterday, for example, a big run-up in soybean prices. So, in fact, I visited with a few that said, boy, things are really clicking here. I know there's a bunch of broker calls that were getting done yesterday. Should I be hedging something now and, getting some price locked in? Is this going to be an abnormality? Is this going to drop right back down? And no matter who you talk to in the farming world, trying to outfigure those markets is something else, and you really can't outfigure it. It's no different than the stock market. It's ebbing and flowing and upping and downing, and knowing your cost, trying to find a spot where you can at least lock in something at times that's going to give you some floors and some bottoms. We at United FCS, we have a product called AgriHedge. It's one way that we can actually provide the swap coverage, which in other words is a way to help cover the margin money that goes out there if they were to be involved in some hedging. So there are lots of ways and tools that they can try to at least lock in a floor and some pricing for themselves, Bill. But the most frustrating part for the industry is when the pricing isn't there and I simply can't get enough out of the market to cover things. What do I do? Mm-hmm. And, I know I could bring all of the lending community to the table and our hands are tied at that point too. I wish we could come up with some magic potion that would help everybody's income go up. But the statement you made about incomes being down dramatically, no question. These prices are part of the multiplier equation that have just dropped their gross income significantly, and really to the point where everybody is different, but it's very difficult to find any black ink. Mm-hmm. And you talk about something that can be rather sobering and a little bit depressing, quite right. Honestly, heading into a new spring season is not having a chance to have anything being paid to yourself, for your return to your labor, and let alone keeping up with equipment and everything else. So, and there's so many other things in the world that tend to have an influence on those prices. It isn't always just strictly how much grain is in the world and how much is available. Of course, there are funds out there, and there are other economic forces and currency exchange rates with other countries, and you name it, strength of the dollar. So many things that come into play here, and I just admire the guys out there and the ladies that are trying to figure out how to keep black ink in their own operations. So.
It seems like in the back of my mind I can remember maybe this was during the crisis of the 80s, but didn't the state at one time even do something on maybe either forgiving or foregoing some of these taxes on property, on land? To try to ease, the situation that we had during when there were so many foreclosures and, just bankruptcies and things sure. like that going. Because that seems to be an issue right now where a lot of the, burden is on these taxes. I mean, on this agricultural land, not everything can be homesteaded.
Yeah.
And it gets to be where, they're probably in a lot of these smaller communities are maybe paying more than their fair share when it comes to maybe like funding the schools and things like that.
Yeah, we're into many different ways to fund our lives, isn't it? And no question, there's been I think a big burden placed on agriculture lately. I know we've got some land that's non-homestead tax rates that are probably into that $50 and $60 an acre range, perhaps. Boy, that's mm-hmm. up there. It's a lot of dollars coming off an acre of land to support whatever government's going on. And you're right, many pieces and a lot of hands that go into the pie. We all know that we need a certain amount of money just to support our municipalities and our county infrastructure and those types of things, and then let alone education and you name it, it mm-hmm. goes on and on. So there is a large burden on all of us, in terms mm-hmm. of property tax. And I don't envy all the politicians at times trying to figure out the best way to make that go. But some relief, I think, is being talked about, and certainly would be encouraged if you look at the ag side strictly. It gets back to, nobody's shy about paying some things if there's enough dollars to go around,
right,
to pay things. But when it backs off and you can't cover it, it gets real difficult. So.
Well, again, I know that, you guys want to be, forthright, and you want to make sure that, you are keeping the lines of communications open with your clients because, sometimes these aren't the most fun things to talk about, but, it is a partnership, it's got to be, everybody has to kind of be pulling together,
Yeah, absolutely. And, all we can do is continue to encourage good communication. From a producer standpoint, just keeping their other partners that they have in their business informed of how things are going. I think that's the whole gamut. Certainly informing their lenders that, here's how I foresee things and, kind of do their own forward forecasting, and here's where I see things turning out a few months down the road. Just trying to stay on top of the business as best as they can. I know there's been a lot of communication between producers and landowners, of course, and trying to come up with a reasonable and fair, some kind of an equitable, rate of rental for using a farm and so forth. Communicating with just everybody. It's a good thing. It can be hard, though. It's certainly a hard human emotion thing to be going through, and perhaps times aren't as good as we'd like to see them. It's easy to come into a shell and maybe not visit, but I know the lending community as a whole out there is doing all they can to continue to, work with producers as best as possible and figuring out ways to structure liabilities and make things flow so that you can get from point A to B here until some of the economics just become a little more strong.
Yeah. Well, I think, people that maybe haven't been actively, in production but have owned property for maybe a generation or two, I think they really have some empathy, for, the guys that are out there that are, putting in the seed and everything and doing the harvesting. And hopefully a lot of that can take care of itself, where I'm sure, they've got those taxes to pay and they have to, somehow support themselves. And I'm sure a lot of people that are renting out their property, that's kind of their form of income. They maybe don't have a lot of other sources of income. So it's, it's one of those things where if everybody maybe can sacrifice a little bit, short term, that, we can still be in the business, down the road. So
yeah, come back at it for another day here. And, you think back in the old, I shouldn't say old times because it still happens today, but, sharecropping used to be such a common and really the norm, so many years ago. And over time that has become less and less for some obvious reasons. Nobody wants to take all of the risk, too. So if I can just simply get paid cash for the use of my property and I don't have to risk anything for it, well, that's kind of an easy thing. But at the same time, realistically, the old tried and true formulas that were put together that were the foundation of some share values still really hold true today, Bill. I really always feel that there really can't be more than a third of that income at most going, to a landowner, and that's just been a fair number over the years. And we've seen it at times where those rental rates might be getting closer to 50. I even saw one as high as 60% of that person's projected revenue. And, that doesn't leave enough left over, just plain and simple, for the operation to support everything else that they've got to do, given the cost of seed and chemical and fuel and, you name it, that it's an expensive business to be in. So.
Yeah. Well, and then again, we were, certainly blessed with just terrific crops. You can't really even count on that, these kind of yields, that we had last year. Certainly looks favorable as getting, a good start to things. But, boy, a lot can happen in a short period of time. And I know maybe just kind of touch a little bit on, the the multi-peril and hail insurance and things like that
Sure.
that you guys offer through
Sure.
United SCS. So.
Well, of course, the multi-peril, the all-risk type insurance, that sales closing date ended here back in March 15th. Most everybody carries that coverage nowadays to whatever level that works best for them. Usually it's a revenue-based product based on the history of their own farm production, so they've got some base revenue that they can count on. Right now, the way the price is set in that, it didn't provide them complete coverage, in other words, in covering all their input costs, but it provides at least a pretty decent layer for them. So that being done and over with, the only other thing that can be done is, do some perhaps hail insurance as another way to offset some of that possible production risk that's out there. Hail is usually one of the other perils that could possibly sneak up and do some damage, of course. The other one that we've seen quite a big increase in the last number of years on the corn side of things has been some wind coverage, either through green snap or some companies have a different variety of wind coverage where if it's really lodged bad, for example, and pollination perhaps is hurt, or extra harvest expense because you have to combine one direction or whatever it may be. We've seen quite an uptick in purchasing of some of those protections as well. So, I think as a group, the farm community out there on the grain side tries to do all they can to use some of those tools to offset some of that income risk that they deal with all the time.
I know one of the things I didn't even realize, now your crop in hail insurance, if you are forward contracting, in other words, selling, bushels you don't yet have, that can help then if for some reason, those bushels aren't there at harvest time or when your option is due.
Yeah, that's very true. And, those that take advantage of using some of that forward pricing, again, if they find some opportunity there that works well in their operation, at least that gives them some peace of mind that if there is a hiccup in production or, a spot storm comes through, face it, we don't know when the rain could turn off. It could be done and it isn't going to come back. Well, what do you do then? I've committed to delivering something to an elevator. How do I work through on this? Well, of course, those dollars are at least available to replace those contracts and at least help cover the obligation that they had for themselves and so forth. But
well, in the event of a drought too, it's probably not just you that doesn't have the bushels. There might be an overall shortage out there, and then if you have to buy. In return, you're going to be definitely, probably paying more than what you would normally then for.
Yeah, absolutely. For every one side, there's a counter side. You've got a livestock producer that if he didn't need or get the crop that he was hoping for, he still has animals that need to be fed. So there again, there's a way to go out and at least procure the grain that's needed for the feed side. So.
Well, anything in closing here, John, again, that you'd like to kind of stress for our producers out there? Because, it's an exciting time, and yet, as you said, this year somewhat of a sobering time, too, just based on these numbers that they're dealing with right now.
Yeah, I just, I guess, let's keep our chins up and, continue to, we're looking at everything as being as optimistic as we certainly can, but at the same time, we have to keep that level of reality, before us that, whatever's not going to be able to be done because some leaner economics, we'll have to continue to look forward and keep communicating about things and how can we help get people through some stressful times. It's if you liken it to a wage earner, if they were to work all year long and get to the end of the year and their boss gave them a bill that said, guess what, we couldn't really afford to pay you everything that we paid you this year,
right.
and here's your bill, and you have to go and borrow someplace to cover that or something. I mean, that maybe a poor analogy, but that's, in some cases what agriculture is going through right now.
Yeah.
So,
and let's face it, this is going to affect the whole overall economy, too, because
right.
it's such a ripple effect. It's such a real basic,
right.
economic generator in our area, at least. none of us are really going to be immune from this if this continues.
Yeah.
So
we'll let's really hope that one thing that they can certainly control, and they're always doing a good job at it, is put the crop in, do what they can, continue to milk the cows, you name it, do all the things that they can control, and let's hope that the markets will give this effort some reward in the end. So.
Right. Well, and hopefully, too, if, like you said, there have been a couple of opportunities now, especially if you maybe, had some old stock on hand, that maybe you could actually sell, for a little bit of a modest, increase than what you had anticipated even maybe. So
Yeah, at least, been some funny things. Keep your eyes and ears tuned, because it seems like when planting is going on, other things are happening in the markets. Maybe there'll be a little opportunity here to grab something along the way.
Well, John, if people have any questions at all or would like to contact one of the professionals at United FCS, what's the best way to go about doing that?
Yeah, you can either just go to UnitedFCS.com and look on our website and get you some information there, or you can simply call our office at 235-1771.
All right, good to see you, John. Have a great spring, and we'll hope for the best for our agriculture community. It is something that is vital in our region here. It's amazing the amount of income that is generated, whether it's in agriculture, in grains or in the livestock. Yeah. We have a good variety of things that are produced out here. So
absolutely. It's still the bedrock of this area and what brings new money into the world. And I just continue to wish nothing but the best for the industry. So.
All right. Well, you take care. Good to see you again.
Okay, thanks.